Good introduction. Thank you. Appreciate the chance to talk to you guys about the team for Healthy Food Source. I've been with the department for about 16 years, been in the Flagstaff area the whole time. I was in Unit 9 before I was in Unit 7. You guys familiar with the game management units? So my job pretty much is I manage the wildlife in the unit, and I deal with the law enforcement side of things too, make sure people have being licensed and tags and things like that. But also, this is information education, try to reach out to the public and get them involved in hunting and fishing. I really enjoy that part of the job. So why I hunt, really it's kind of changed over the years. It used to be just me and my kids were small, like little kid over there. But now my kids are getting old enough where they hunt. So a lot of it is trying to get them out in the woods, get them to experience things I've gotten experience in years. So sharing it with my family, the experience, challenge, the physical challenge, and also the mental challenge of trying to learn the game, trying to learn how to be patient and where to hunt, where not to hunt, things like that. And then finally, once you have a successful hunt, and able to process that meat and bring it home to your family, you know where that meat came from. Pretty beneficial. And then all the health benefits that come with that. And then outside of all those things, I'm gonna talk about the North American model a little bit. Are you guys aware of the North American model with that? A little bit. Okay. Just some pictures of being out in the woods. It's my daughter. He was 10 there. It was my first deer hunt. It's my son. He just kind of tags along with me whenever he gets a chance. North American model. I'm just going to read this for you guys. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the world's most successful. No other continent attains as close to a complete complement of native wildlife species. While other countries struggle to conserve the little they have left, we enjoy a great abundance and diversity of native wildlife. This is due to a large part of the forward thinking of early conservationists who saw the need to preserve wildlife in their habitats. Their efforts resulted in the North American model of wildlife conservation, which strives to sustain wildlife and species and habitats through sound science and active management. The big part here is a user-paid public benefit model. So, when you buy your hunting license and your tags, that money goes back to Game and Fish to help us manage the wildlife. And then there's also the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration Act, which it's an act that was voted for by hunters and anglers that puts a tax on hunting equipment that in 2023 raised $1.2 billion. The Dingell-Johnson is the Fish Restoration Act. It's a 10% tax on fishing equipment, and it raised $435 million in 2023. And I mentioned the hunter and anglers also contributed to the game and fish department by buying hunting licenses and tags. But all this is, it's voted for and it's approved by the hunters and anglers. And then this goes back to the science and the habitat restoration and things like that for that benefit wildlife, not just wildlife that's taken during hunting season, also like just native species throughout the state that the Game and Fish actively manage. Any questions on that? So how healthy is the meat we eat? So I'm here today to talk about the health benefits from hunting and obtaining your protein from the wild source. And so we can kind of talk about the downside of the meat that we buy from the store. So the animal that you buy from the store really just depends on how it's raised. There's a big kick right now for like grass-fed, antibiotic-free, no hormones, and things like that. But you can avoid having to worry about any of that if you harvest your meat from the wild. So the diet of domesticated livestock is dominated by grains and corn. And that's not their natural food source. And then top of that, they add antibiotics and things like that to fatten up the livestock before they process it. According to the USDA, the wild meats are higher in protein and iron and B vitamins than its beef or pork counterparts. Purdue University did a study, and deer and elk and antelope contains a healthier ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids than even the counterpart of it, like grass-fed beef. Wild game is a great source of iron and zinc, beneficial minerals necessary for overall health, good health. And then the kind of other side of that is industrial farming has negative impacts to our environment. So according to the Food and Agricultural Organization, 18% of greenhouse gases are being emitted from the transportation and production of like farm-raised chickens, farm-raised cattle, just industrial farm protein. So when we think about trying to be responsible to the environment, hunting and angling is a good way to do that, a good alternative to going to the store and buying the meat from the store. If you think about if you just take the transportation of protein all over the world, how much fossil fuels that burns, it's a little bit different than me driving 5 minutes in my truck to go hunt around the Flagstaff area. So the easiest way to get started hunting, most people, when you think about feeding a family, you think about big game species and things like that, but that's kind of daunting for most people to think about, to prepare for, to not feel overwhelmed, to go out in the field and harvest an elk or harvest a deer. It's much easier to get started with small game. And here are a few of the reasons: low equipment costs, abundance of hunting opportunity. This is statewide. This isn't just in the Flagstaff area. This is down in the valley, in the desert habitats as well. You don't have to apply for a permit, so you can go without being drawn. The meat is easily processed in the field because it's much smaller in size. You're not having to worry about transporting a 300-pound elk. Rabbit season is year-round, and then the meat is easily prepared for consumption. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. Okay.
How prevalent are certain? How can you tell if the rabbit's safe?
What I typically do, so most people hunt rabbits in months that didn't have an origin, right? The cooler months of the year. And that'll kind of avoid the parasites and things like that. And if I'm harvesting squirrels or rabbits, as I process it, I'll take a look at its liver.
Yeah.
And you can tell if an animal's healthy as you're processing it. And if you look at the liver, it'll be nice red, deep red color. If it's not healthy, it'll have the spots. And if that's the spots, I just discard that animal. And I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit too. Okay. Of ways to protect yourself when you're processing. So we're going to talk about rabbits and squirrels because we have the cottontail rabbit to hunt in the Flagstaff area, the black-tailed jackrabbit to hunt in the Flagstaff area. And we also have the Abel's tree squirrel. Health benefits for rabbit meat, just kind of the obvious stuff, you're avoiding any antibiotics, any hormones. They're high in protein. Magnesium has a good ratio of omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids. High in potassium, high in phosphorus. It's a good healthy source of protein. There's some people will just raise rabbits in their backyard too for protein. It's a good source. So the health benefits of squirrel meat, same things. Organic, no antibiotics, no hormones, high in protein. Squirrels tend to have some of these other minerals just based on their diet that's beneficial to our health. Selenium, magnesium, good healthy protein source. All right, so getting started. So this is just right out of our regulations. You guys kind of follow along. the first step when you're thinking about hunting is you gotta figure out what animal you're gonna find. You gotta figure out if you need a license, if you need to be drawn, the tags or stamps that you might need. But we're specifically talking about rabbits and squirrels. And you do not need a tag or a stamp. All you're gonna need is a hunting license. Here are the regulations that I just handed out. So the new ones are about to come out pretty quick, soon. So and all this is available online. You don't have to have the hard copy anymore. If you look at those regs, for somebody that's trying to get into hunting as a hobby, that's a pretty big book there to try to learn. And it is daunting. I enforce the laws and the regulations that are in that book, and I still have a hard time. So I definitely get it. Here are a few of the other regulations. If you look here, these are more for the hunt draw information. It'll have some more specifics about these specific species of when you can hunt and the season dates and things like that. But this is specifically for the hunt draw information so that you can draw a tag. So a hunting license. So this is the cost here for a general hunting license. It's $37, and that's for the year. And it's date of purchase. So if you bought one today, it will expire a year from that day. And there's also the option for the hunt fish combo. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's also your fishing license. If you guys have any kids that are interested in hunting between the ages of 10 and 17, it's only $5. We also have these short-term licenses. Non-residents have to pay a little bit more, so they're not paying taxes into the state unless they're a youth. Any questions on that? So this youth deal is pretty sweet. So the most common squirrel in the Flagstaff area, it's this immersed tree squirrel. I'm sure you guys have seen. The squirrel, its habitat is a ponderosa pine forest. What's unique about these squirrels, based compared to other squirrels species found in North America, is it pretty much needs the ponderosa pine tree, and it doesn't store its food. It kind of eats the different parts of the tree all throughout the year, so it's always out foraging and moving around. It's good at having stored food in the winter. Another good picture of them. Got those tasseled ears. So here are the regulations for squirrel. Every species is going to have this in every species that you can hunt will have this in the regulations. So for squirrels, it's got the breakdown here that you're going to need a hunting license. And then it's got legal methods to take. It's got the general hunt, the limited weapon shotgun shooting shot hunt, an archery only hunt, and a falconry only hunt. Somebody that uses bird foot to take game. Not very many of those. And then I also have the bag limit and the possession limit. This is page 53 in your regs. The bag limit is how many squirrels you can harvest in one day. And then the possession limit is how many squirrels you can have in possession. So if you go out 3 days in a row and you harvest 5 squirrels each day, you're at your possession limit. If you haven't eaten any of those squirrels or given them away, you're at your possession limit. You can't go hunt anymore for that species. Does that make sense?
So that'd be how many you could have in the freezer.
How many you can have in the freezer? If I'm, out on a hunt patrol and people have been camping out all weekend, it's how many each person can possess.
15 per.
Yeah, but it's for that person's harvest, right? So it's how many you've killed once you get to 15. Makes sense? Which was probably like 3 years ago. It was hard for people to get to their limit in a day. The last couple of years, the population of squirrels is doing really well, and getting 5 per day is not difficult. And then kind of break down those hunts that I just talked about. So the general hunt, and you have the dates here. And so you see this October 4th through January 31st, the open areas are statewide, excluding 11M. 11M is the unit around Flagstaff, and we just don't allow a general hunt 11M. If you go down here, you'll see a limited weapon shotgun shooting shot season that is 11M. It has the same date. But because hunters in 11M could be fairly close to homes and things like that, it's safer for them to be shooting shotguns with shot versus shooting like a rimfire 22 rifle that could go a little bit further. And so that's why we have those restrictions there. And then we also have an archery only tree squirrel season that starts a little bit earlier. It shows it ending October 3rd, but a general hunt includes archery. So you can continue to use a bow in that general time frame here that goes till January 31st. They just get a head start on it because they're probably not going to shoot very. And this includes 11M. So we were talking about a general hunt. So squirrel general, these are all the methods that you can use to take a squirrel. Even down here to a slingshot, pneumatic weapons, falconry. The only thing you can't do is you can't trap. Here's the shotgun shooting shot. Here's the archery. So if you're out during that October 4th through January 31st, you can use all of those except trap. And this chart is in the regs. It's broken down for each species and what the legal methods of take are. Now we'll move on to rabbits. So cottontail, blacktail jackrabbit, and antelope jackrabbit. Right here, so the cottontail has a bag limit. The jackrabbits do not. Jackrabbits are really big. And it's actually a lot of meat. When I typically in the fall when I'm quail hunting, because they're kind of in that lower habitat, lower elevation habitat, I will target jackrabbits because they're tasty and it's a lot of meat. Kind of supplements the quail harvest. We'll talk about all of these here. So here's a picture of the blacktail. This is the one that's more prominent in the Flagstaff area. I mean, you'll see these up in the ponderosa pine habitat, but you see more of them in the lower elevations, the pinyon and juniper habitat. So like 7,000 feet, you'll still run into them, go down, 5,500, seems that they're more prevalent down there. Here are the regs for rabbits. And it's the same setup here. So 5, possession for 15, this is for the cottontail. And then here you got the season dates and they're year round. And you also, if you're hunting 11M, you have the same deal where you have to be a limited shotgun shooting shot. Because when you look here, general cottontail, 11M is excluded from the general hunt. You have falconry. Here, this is broken down on the methods to take. You can trap jackrabbits, but it's all the same as a squirrel. What you can legally take this wildlife with.
And you did say then that about this time of year would be good for rabbit too, because of the temperature, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That rabbit would be fine this time of year. It's still been really cold. It seems to be that the parasite would be more prevalent in the warmer months. A lot of guys will hunt rabbits year round, just expect to eat in person. it always tends to be 4 months.
Going back to possession, is it per person or per house?
Per person.
Okay.
So like in my house with say me, my son, my daughter, and my wife, it's 15 per person. As long as they're the ones harvesting. Right? It's not like I get, so that's whatever number that is, 50, 60. I don't get to possess 60 just because I have 3 more people.
So all those people that have license too.
They have to have a license and they have to harvest it, right? So a lot of times if I go out to a lake, like fishing, this is the same thing for fishing. If I go out to a lake and 2 people are fishing, and they're at their limit of, they say they have 6 trout, there's 2 people, it has to be, one person caught up to 4, and then the next person caught the 2, or 3 and 3, or whatever it is. It can't be like, oh, I've got 8, you take my 4. So it's specific per person. Okay, so now step 2, kind of got the species we want to hunt. We learned when we can hunt. Now we're going to go into where we can. We kind of already got the when too, because it's got the season dates. Now we're going to talk about where we can hunt. And Matt is a avid hunter. Yeah, right there. He works for the Game and Fish too. And Matt, if you want to add anything, feel free. So here are the game management units in the state. You have Indian reservations here, and then some private land, but all of these red boundaries are game management units. So we're here in the Flagstaff area. So here's 11M, and then this is all region 2 in this bigger green boundary here. So region 2 goes north of the Grand Canyon as well. So here's a little bit better picture of that. So here you have 11M that encompasses Flagstaff. 11M, a lot of people think a metro unit, there may not be a lot of hunting opportunity. There's a ton of hunting opportunity in 11M. This is a lot of Forest Service land around Flagstaff, because Flagstaff's a little island here, surrounded by Forest Service. So there's a lot of good wildlife habitat around Flagstaff. Here's 7 East. That's one of the units that I manage. And this encompasses, high elevation here around San Francisco peaks, and it goes out to super low elevation, 3,000 feet, out here towards the Little Colorado River. And it's got, great Abbott's tree squirrel habitat. It's got great jackrabbit habitat. And it's super close to town. You don't have to drive very far. So places to hunt. So you got the hunt unit, and when you're looking at, okay, I know what species I want to hunt. I live here in Flagstaff, so I want to hunt close to home. You still need to look in our regulations, and there's little notes about each hunt management unit. And then there's like even an info page, right? There's an info page for our game management units that'll break down like places to hunt, the special regulations that might apply to that hunt unit. But you need to do a little bit of research on the game management unit that you're going to be hunting. So within all these game management units around the Flagstaff area, you're going to have a lot of national forests. It's the Coconino and the Kaibab National Forest. You're going to have state trust land. State trust land, if you're hiking or anything like that, you have to buy a permit. Mountain biking, hiking, you have to have a permit. When you buy your hunting license, that is your permit to be on state trust land. And you have BLM. That's not very common in the Flagstaff area, but you can hunt on BLM. It's public land. There is private land. We'll talk about private land a little bit more.
Is that for the state trust land? Does that only apply when you're hunting?
Applies when you're hunting.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're on state trust land and you're squirrel hunting and you have your hunting license, that's your valid permit to be
Just hiking around.
You need a permit. if you have a quad, that OHV decal that's purchased from the state, that is your permit to be on state listing. Private land, we'll talk about this a little bit, but a lot of private land in the Flagstaff area is the Babbitt's, Babbitt Ranches, Walking Cane Ranch. There's a lot of different ranches that allow hunter access. They have agreements with the Game and Fish Department. We kick them a little bit of money to help them maintain their roads, and they allow hunters on their private land. So places not to hunt. So if you're hunting an 11M, you got to be very aware of the quarter-mile issue. So you're not allowed to discharge a firearm or a bow within a quarter mile of a house or a residence or a occupied structure. That's illegal. It's a law, and I'll write citations for that too often. If people get too close to houses, it's pretty obvious, like in the flag, like real close to town. But if you're out, say on the 151 road in the 7 East, you could be deer hunting and get close to a house and not even know it. So it really pays to do your research on the unit. It pays to use some sort of mapping application on your phone so that you know how close you are to houses. And that mapping application will also help you when you're hunting if you think you may be close to private property that doesn't allow hunting. But if you are, say you're out in the forest and you're hiking and you come across a fence line and you're not sure if that's private property or not, what I typically tell people to do is walk 400 yards in either direction maybe and see if they see a sign, because it is the landowner's responsibility to sign it to keep hunters off. And the way the law is written is what a reasonable person would expect to be private property. So if they call me and say, hey, there's a hunter on my property, I'll contact the hunter and we'll go and figure out where he crossed. And I'll be like, well, there's no signs. There's no violation here because there was no way for him to know. But if I talk to him and he's got, a mapping application like Onyx or something like that, I'll be like, maybe you can use private property. So it's what a reasonable person would expect in private property. And then there's no hunting on municipal parks, reserves, county parks. So like in Flagstaff, like Buffalo Park, there's no hunting in Buffalo Park. People definitely hunted on Buffalo Park. Yeah. Already covered that. Let's see. So the reason I had that there. So we're going to talk about rimfire rifles. And then we're going to talk about shotgun shooting shot. So I'm trying to keep it specific to squirrels and rabbits. So here, a little 22 long rifle, great tool for hunting rabbits and squirrels. But you can't use that in the 11M. But it is a great option. That's what most people use when they're hunting those two species. Relatively affordable. Most manufactured firearm in the world, and ammunition is pretty accessible. So here's a little diagram of rimfire. There's not a primer here. It's a primer mix on the butt end of this shell here. This is a rimfire rifle, and this is a centerfire rifle. But you can use either one of those. But most people use that rimfire rifle. And then the other option would be a Remington 870, so a shotgun. So 20 gauge, 410, 12 gauge. This is what I would rather use. I grew up in Southeast Texas, and this is how we hunt squirrels in Southeast Texas with a shotgun. Are you guys familiar with shotguns? I'll kind of go over that a little bit. So shotgun shooting shot. This is what your shell's going to look like, the profile of it. And this is what your pattern's going to look like here. And here's a little bit better demonstration of that. So 12 gauge, so this is 30 yards. This is 5-shot. And here's the pattern here. 20 gauge. Here's the pattern in 410. And You see the 12 gauge is a more powerful weapon. And this is what you're getting. So this is about your range when it comes to using a shotgun, shooting shot. And here it is a little bit closer. You see the patterns are a little bit closer together of the pellets. And so for me, if you're bird hunting, quail hunting, a 7.5 is a good load. This is just cheap Winchesters you can buy at any sporting goods store. And then you have the 6-shot. Sometimes I'll use 6-shot as well. You know, a little bit further distance away, I'll try to use the 6-shot. Since we talk about firearms, we'll talk about firearm safety. This is what we teach in our hunter education course, tab +1. So you treat all firearms as they're loaded at all times. Always keep the muzzle pointed in the safe direction. Be sure of your target and beyond. And then the +1 is keep your finger outside the trigger guard until you're ready to shoot. So if you follow all these steps here, you should never have an accident. Or should never hurt anybody if you do it. Okay, so now common violations, carry transport. For common violations, I'm not really going to cover that. I'm kind of covering it as we're moving through here, like hunting within a quarter mile, things like that. I can kind of touch on hunting from the vehicle. We don't ever want to use a vehicle to aid us in a hunt. So can't shoot from vehicles. We want to encourage people to go out and hike and get into the forest and actually not drive up and down the roads. We'll go into carry and transport in a second. So basic gear. So a few of these things, I guess the gun is the most important. Sharp knife or shears, that's pretty important. Cooler, that kind of depends on what time of year it is. You know, if I was hunting rabbits right now, I probably won't have a cooler that I can keep them cool once I harvest the animal. I like to put them in a Ziploc bag, get them back to my truck, process it, put it in a Ziploc bag, stick it in the cooler. Binoculars, they're helpful, but not necessary. Backpack or game vest, again, it's helpful, but you don't have to have it. It's helpful to carry extra ammo, a harvested animal, water, snacks for your hike. And so this is where, so latex gloves. So if I'm processing an animal, I want to have a glove just to avoid any risk of getting sick. And so to have, you know, a good pair of latex gloves, maybe work gloves, just to kind of avoid any kind of contamination. And hunter orange, it's not a requirement in Arizona to wear hunter orange, but depending on when you go out, there could be a lot of other hunters in the field. It's a good idea to have something on that they can see, so that they will know that you're in the area. So I would highly recommend it, especially in those October, November, December hunts. There tends to be a lot of hunters in the forest. So hunting strategy. So what do you think I'd be hunting in this habitat? Squirrels, right? Maybe some cottontails. But this is going to be great squirrel habitat. You got these old growth ponderosa pine trees. This is perfect for squirrel hunting. So for squirrel hunting, you move slow through the woods, you know, have a seat on the stump and just be observant. See what you see. You can hear them. A lot of times you can see them on the ground as they're around foraging. And if you're out in October, sometimes October can be dry. You kind of get around water sources and things like that because the animals will tend to concentrate around water sources. So here's a pinyon juniper habitat here. Same thing. You want to move slowly and quietly through the forest. A lot of times, if you're hunting rabbits, you'll walk up on one and it'll kind of run. That's when you use a shotgun to shoot it. More of those quick shots. If you're using a 22, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to try to stalk the animal after you see it. Try to get a nice clear shot at it. Same thing. These habitats tend to be much drier than the higher elevations. So, focusing on areas with the water sources, good tactic. You guys have any questions?
I have a question about the squirrels. If you're shooting with a shotgun, or I guess with a rifle, are you primarily trying to hit something that's on the ground? Like you don't want to be shooting from trees.
No, you shoot for trees.
Okay.
What, like, if I go out with my family squirrel hunting, I typically will walk with my son. If we see a squirrel, I'll tell him to run after it without a firearm in his hand. He just runs it up the tree. And then we get set up on the tree and I set him up on a little shooting stick and let him shoot until he hits it or doesn't hit it. That's the typical tactic there, is to get him up the tree, shoot him in the tree. Shotgun, you may be able to shoot one while it's on the ground if you're close enough to it. They tend to run much, it's probably that like 75 to 100 yards when you see them running. You're not going to shoot at them with a shotgun that far away. You're going to wait until they go up in the tree and you're going to try to find them up in the tree.
Thanks.
So I have a rabbit skinning video. Probably not going to work though. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about like applying for a hunt. If there's no other questions about small game hunting,
We do keep that flat.
just leave it. Yep. Normally I get back to my truck and then I clean everything there and just kind of toss it off to the side right there. If it's big game, I tend to take a lot of things out of the pile, like the heart, the liver.
Yeah.
I'll take that one. But small game, just kind of put it there. A lot of guys eat the heart, squirrels.
Mhm.
So don't apply. So when you're applying for a hunt, I'm just going to briefly touch on this. So this is just a chart of the odds of draw. And you can find this on our website if you just search draw odds. And it's broken down by unit. If you look here, I don't know why my unit doesn't have the number, but this is 7 and 9 for the deer hunt. They're combined. And you can see about 2,700 applicants for first choice, 2,000 for second. And I issue like 1,100 permits. And so the odds of getting drawn are about 28%. So pretty good, not too bad. Every other year, every 2 years, something like that. If you look at some of these hunts, some of them were very, very low. So some people wait a long time if they want a specific area to hunt. But if you look at this and you're really just dying to go hunt, you can look at these draw odds, and then you can come up with a game plan. Some units really, really high draw odds where you can draw a tag. It's almost 100% chance to draw a tag. But those units tend to be a little bit harder because the hunters know that that's a little bit harder unit to hunt, so they don't put in for it. And the good thing too is to look at how many permits. So this hunt here, 6A, this was a rut hunt in December. There were only 10 permits issued. And you still had almost 1,000 people putting in for it. So the draw out really low. I actually put it out. I think that was my first choice. This last year, I put in for that hunt, knowing that I would draw it, but you never know, right? There's still some luck involved to draw something. So a lot of times, how it works is, so when you look at an application, there's like 5 choices you can put into it. So there's 5 choices. So your first 2 choices are kind of together, and then your next 2 choices are together, and your last choice is together. So if you put in, so the strategy that most people take is they look at a hunt that's like, oh man, I'd really love that hunt. Like this 6A hunt. Really love that hunt. I'm gonna put myself in for that first. And then I'm gonna put in for a little bit easier hunt, like the 6B hunt. I'm gonna put that in for my second choice. So what happens in the draw process, it's all computerized, but when you're drawn, when your name comes up, it looks and says, okay, are there any hunts left in this 6A hunt? Are there any tags left? And if there's a tag left, then you get it. If there is not a tag left, then it'll look at your second choice. And it's like, okay, well, there's a tag left to the second choice, so he gets that tag. If neither one of your first two options are available, then your name goes back in the draw, and it can be drawn again. Okay, so then you can be drawn again. So most people's strategies are the hardest hunt for the first choice, the hunt they are okay with for the second, and then the easier draws for the third and fourth. You think that? No.
What do you do for number 5? You just
I don't ever put them in 5. You ever put them in 5?
Only when I know I wanna hunt just one single hunt, I'll put all 5 choices the same one.
Yeah.
That's usually for hunting me. Operating that I heavily and heavily.
Yeah, because there are some units with the different species that will have leftovers. So, if you have mostly have lean hunts at this point that have leftovers, have a ton of permits and and only say 1,000 permits and only 800 applicants. So if you put that as your 5th choice, you would have got it. Makes sense. And then we do have the leftover round of draw afterwards. So once we go through the draw process and there's leftovers, then we open it back up to the public to put in for those leftovers.
see those afterwards.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is it actually doesn't impact your bonus. So when you put in for these hunts, and you don't get drawn, you get a bonus. When you do that for 5 years, and you have 5 bonus points. So your odds, that's the way to think about that is now you have your name in the hat 5 times versus once. So the odds of you getting drawn are higher. So the longer you put in, your odds go up. But the leftover permits doesn't impact your bonus points. So you can put in for those and you won't lose all your bonus points. Because once you're drawn for a general, once you're drawn for this 6A hunt, I had 10 bonus points and I was lucky enough to get drawn, then I go back to 0. But if you take Hunter Ed and then there's a loyalty point, this is a more complicated, but that's kind of the gist of the application process. And then we have this for, elk, deer, pronghorn, turkey, bighorn sheep, all the big game species. Bear, there's an over-the-counter bear season, and mountain lions over-the-counter for the big game species. And there's draw bear hunts. Any questions on it? Useful links. Our website's great. If you guys hunter education, you get a bonus point once you go through the hunter education program that you'll have for the rest of your life. I'd recommend if you guys are interested in hunting, taking the hunter education course. We have a lot of outdoor skills programs that are in those registrations. We're gonna have the new ones are gonna come up, but there's a lot of camps for adults, kids that will go out and you'll have a mentor to actually take you out hunting. They'll spend a couple days in the forest and have a Lena hunt and deer hunt or quail hunt. There's a lot of really cool outdoor skills camps. And then if you're, like I said, you got to do the research. Go to the Coconino National Forest, make sure you look at the regulations that they have. They don't have any regulations on hunting, but they will have regulations on like motor vehicle use and things like that. And then we also have this HABI map, which will show you like distributions of species across the state. You can also use Onyx. Onyx has the same stuff, but that is all I got for you guys. Questions?
How do you prepare a squirrel? How do you like to prepare it?
I like slow cooking. So I'll just do it like a stew. I'll do pulled pork type recipe sometimes too, so I'll just shred the meat off of the bone after it's been in the slow cooker a little bit, and then pour barbecue sauce on it, and you got like a pulled pork sandwich. Matt was nice enough to do some recipes for some other games.
Thanks, Matt. There's like 14 recipes for
Found
game
an old
and
file
14
and
for
bunch of
fish
them.
too. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
The healthy part of it.
I was gonna say, don't look at the ingredients too close. Some of them may not be too healthy.
You can see.
So I did have one question about we post the draw odds. Do we still post the success rate of those hunts, or is that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting to look at.
So that is not in the draw odds, that's just in the Arizona hunt information.
Okay.
But you can look at the success rates. So when you look at like, when you're looking at that 6A rut hunt, the success rate's really, really high. And that's also why it's hard to draw.
Yeah.
Typically when the success rate of the hunter goes down, the success rate of getting drawn goes up. Because people, information spreads and people are like, I put in for, 7 East elk hunt, I didn't see an elk the whole time. So then the next year, fewer people put in for 7 East. For me, I tend to look at that and I'm like, well, my odds of getting drawn are higher, that's all I want. We can place them out in the woods and there's a chance. So.
And I started big game hunting. That was kind of my strategy. Not that you should take my strategy, but I kind of a rule of thirds or quarters. So if I felt like I had a quarter to a third chance of getting drawn and that as the hunt success, that's probably a pretty good hunt.
Yeah,
Knowing that most people don't get out and hike at all.
yeah,
So just by getting out and actually hiking in the woods to hunt, you're already setting yourself up to be more successful than your average hunter. Chance of actually getting something goes way up. And so
we actually manage for a deer hunt in my unit, I'm managing for like a 25% success rate. So when I make my permit allocation for the year, I'm assuming that about 25% of the hunters in the field are actually going to harvest there. So it's like 1 out of 4. Some units, sometimes that success rate's lower, sometimes it's higher. So like right now in my unit for deer, the success rate's like 45%. So it's super high. That really hasn't impacted much the draw on my unit, believe it or not. But I do when I'm out patrolling and I go into a camp and somebody's like, I haven't seen anything. Like, look, just because you're out here doesn't mean you're gonna get to harvest them. It's still hunting. You still have to go actually hunt. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, look, we managed for a success rate of 1 out of 4 people, or 3 out of 10 from hunting. So that kind of puts it in perspective. And when they actually do harvest something, they're thrilled.
Yeah, I know our son was still, we had
Yeah.